Fair and Balanced joining us now, Arkansas Republican Senator Tom Cotton of the Senate Armed Services and Intelligence Committees. Senator, welcome. Your thoughts on this night as these strikes have begun.
Thank you, Brett. Well, first off, I want to express my admiration for our brave troops who carried out these strikes. I have little doubt that the pilots and their crews had a tactical success tonight. I think it's an open question whether this will be a strategic success, by which I would set the standard for whether these attacks on Americans and international shipping stops. I have serious reservations about whether it will be a strategic success for numerous reasons. Just simply put, one example, we let Iran's leaders hightail it back to Iran from Syria and Iraq. So I suspect we did not kill many key Iranian leaders in these regions. Joe Biden also has shown no indication that he's going to reverse his failed Iran policy, really 11 years of failed Obama-Biden Iran policy of trying to appease and conciliate and grant concessions to the Ayatollahs. As far as I know, he is still giving sanctions relief to Iran to the tune of billions of dollars, even after the October 7th atrocities. So while I don't doubt that this will be a tactical success tonight and in the days ahead, I have very serious reservations about whether this will be a strategic success. We'll know soon enough whether the attacks have stopped.
Senator, some of your colleagues, Senator Lindsey Graham, Senator John Cornyn, have called for attacks inside Iran, maybe even inside Tehran. Are you one of those?
Brett, we have to have a serious punishing response. I have not yet seen that response in the reporting that I've heard over the last couple hours. If you want to avoid a war with Iran, the way to do that is to strike Iranians and its assets hard, the way Donald Trump did in 2020 when he killed their terrorist mastermind Qasem Soleimani, the way Ronald Reagan did in 1988 when he sank half of Iran's navy. Ronald Reagan was asked if we were at war with Iran. He chuckled and he said, no, they wouldn't be that stupid. And in fact, they were not. And their attacks stopped. That's the way to avoid a war. The way to get into a war is the hesitant half measures that Joe Biden has implemented over the last 3 years.
Well, would deterrence, we talk a lot about deterrence. Clearly, Iran pushing these funds to Iranian proxy groups was not deterred over recent weeks, really since the beginning of October, in these attacks, more than 165 of them. How would you do it differently? How do you think a Trump administration would do it differently?
Well, Brett, let me say it's not just the 165 attacks since the October 7th atrocity in Israel. There were almost 100 attacks in the first 2.5 years of the Biden administration. Secretary Austin admitted last year, when I questioned him at the Armed Services Committee, that there'd been something like 75 or 80 attacks, and we had only responded 4 times, usually just blowing up empty buildings in the middle of the desert. It's little wonder that Iran, when you couple that anemic response with tens of billions of dollars in sanctions relief, has thought they could get away with these attacks. What President Trump did, and what he'll do again, is actually deter Iran. He killed their terrorist mastermind. He clamped down on the Iranian economy to the point they were almost running out of foreign currency reserves. Iran, like most people in the Middle East, understand one thing: force and resolution. That's exactly the opposite of what we've had for 11 years under Barack Obama and Joe Biden. Again, Joe Biden can reverse his policy. He can clamp down on Iran's economy as well. He can stop the flow of oil. He can stop giving them sanctions relief in addition to these strikes tonight, and I hope more strikes to come. I suspect he won't do that, which means, unfortunately, these attacks are likely to continue against Americans.
We're just getting some word as we're speaking here. This is coming from the ground in Iraq. That 3 houses used as headquarters for one of these Iraq militias that's backed by Iran were targeted in Al Qaim, as well as a weapons storage area. Then an operation headquarters in Askashat, Iraq, also a weapons store there, but Iranian-backed militias headquarters. We, again, to your point, have not heard of senior officials, IRGC officials, as of yet, having been targeted on this. But CENTCOM saying of the 85 targets, they believe they hit every single one that they were going after.
Yeah, Brett, as I said, I have little doubt that our pilots and our air crews did an exceptional job executing this mission. I have reservations about the scope of the mission. It's a welcome development to knock out, weapons bunkers or headquarters houses, but Iran's leaders who hightailed it back to Iran before these attacks happen can always come back and they can find new houses, or they can get new weapons depots. They can set up new communication center. And again, it just projects the same kind of weakness and equivocation and hesitation that President Biden has done for 2 years in Ukraine as well. When we have 3 Americans killed, welcomed back today by their grieving families, dozens wounded, and President Biden has been extremely open over the last 5 days about his desire not to have any serious escalation. What does he call what happened last weekend when those Americans killed? That was escalation. The only way to stop it is to actually strike at what Iran holds most dear, its key leaders and its key assets, not Arab proxy groups.
I hear you, and I hear that coming from a number of senators in your party saying it needs to be a more aggressive response. But if you look at the polls that we just went through in a couple of states, there is this sentiment inside the Republican Party that the U.S. should be more focused on the U.S. border here, less focused overseas. I know you advocate for a very strong U.S. presence, and that brings peace. But inside your party, there is a real debate about that. Do you concede that?
Well, Brett, I think what most Republicans want is peace, and they understand the way to achieve it, as Ronald Reagan did, as Donald Trump did, was peace through strength. We can protect our border, as President Trump did. We can deter our adversaries abroad, like President Trump did at the same time. But when you project weakness into the entire world, you shouldn't be surprised, for instance, that Russia invades Ukraine, that Hamas commits its atrocity against Israel, that Iran thinks it can hit Americans over and over and over again, or for that matter, that millions of illegal migrants come from all over the world knowing that you won't enforce your own border. That's what President Biden has done. What President Trump did, like President Reagan before him, is actually deter our adversaries. Strong, forceful responses, like killing Qasem Soleimani, sinking half of Iran's navy, bombing Libya after they tried to kill American soldiers in Germany in 1986, doesn't bring war, it brings peace.
I just talked to the Prime Minister of Qatar. He described the Middle East as a tinderbox. I've been over there a lot. You're right, strength does do a lot as far as leadership there and decisions that they make. What is the strength it would take to have Tehran change what it is clearly wanting to do in the region? Another Qasem Soleimani attack? What would it take?
Well, Brett, it takes a total reversal of President Biden's Iran policy. Again, it's the same failed policy that Barack Obama pursued for 8 years, thinking somehow that you can treat this radical theocratic dictatorship as a normal nation, as if it's some small country in Western Europe about which we have a trade dispute. It's not. It still chants death to America, death to Israel every week. The way to do this is exactly what President Trump did. Forceful military responses where necessary, an extensive pressure campaign on Iran's economy, financial flows, also through diplomacy, to force them to pull in their horns. We saw that happen when Ronald Reagan was president, after he sank half their navy. We saw it happen in 2020 after the death of Qasem Soleimani. We've seen the exact opposite of it for 11 years under Barack Obama and Joe Biden.
Last thing, as far as the threat matrix from countries, do you think Iran has ticked up by what we've seen in the Middle East in recent days? And you're on Intel, you're on Senate Armed Services. What keeps you up at night?
Well, what keeps me up at night is the perception around the world that Joe Biden is not up to the job of doing commander-in-chief. Just look at Ukraine. Russia invaded Ukraine when Barack Obama was president. He invaded Ukraine whenever Joe Biden was president. He didn't invade when Donald Trump was president. Look at the aggressive action we've seen from China over the last 3 years while Joe Biden was president. And again, even before the October 7th atrocity in Israel, we had nearly 100 attacks on Americans throughout the Middle East, only 4 or 5 responses that were totally ineffective. One of the reasons we see so much war and strife and tension around the world is that the bad guys around the world understand that President Biden is too weak, too hesitant to defend American citizens and our interests and our allies.
Senator Tom Cotton, we appreciate you coming in on this breaking news night.
Thank you.